All right, welcome back once again, everybody. I'm Don Seifert. It's the Dr. Tree Fruit and Don podcast. I'm here with Dr. Kari Peter. Say hi, Kari.
Hi there.
Dr. Greg Krawczyk. Say hi, Greg.
Hello, everyone.
And starting us off today, Dr. Shan Kumar. Say hi, Sean.
Hello, everyone.
And I will let you get to it.
Sure. So I just wanted to start again with, as usual, with our phenology report for the state. We are, for many varieties, including Honeycrisp in Adams County, we are well past thinning stage right now. We are above 25 millimeters on average, and most other varieties as well. We are above the size where we can thin. So last week was a potential thinning window, was probably the last chemical thinning window that we had from last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, with how cool it has been, it might take a while for the efficacy of that thinner to show because of how cool we've been this week. And so you might have to wait a little bit longer than usual to see the effects of your final chemical thinner application, which you possibly made last week, which is either last Thursday or Friday or Saturday. There were some good warm days in there. And so just because of how cool it's been, it'll take a while to see that. And then with most other parts of the state as well are beyond the size at which we can thin, not because of exactly the size of the apples, but because of the temperatures we have this week, which are quite low. And even the thinners that we use, for example, a seed that we can use for thinning apples between 15 to 20 millimeter size, and ethafon after that, up until 25 millimeter, 26 millimeters, they do not work effectively at this temperature, especially in the 50s, where we are at different parts of the state. And so if you haven't gotten thinning yet, I would then there might be a lot of hand thinning that needs to get done in order to get your crop load right. But if you sprayed last week, just a word of caution that you might want to wait a little bit because it might take a week or slightly even more for you to even see the efficacy of your results, because we're going to have cool weather until later next week. And so you might want to wait a little bit to see the efficacy before you go in and hand thin. Now, we are nearing the end of May. And so this is also the time that if you haven't thought about return bloom sprays, to think about it, especially for varieties like Honeycrisp, where the flower initiation happens 30 to 45 days after full bloom. So the earlier you spray for return bloom, the better. But there is still an opportunity to spray for return bloom with about 5 to 7.5 parts per million of NAA. That's from anywhere from 2 to 3 ounces of Plutone or 2 to 3 ounces of Plutone or Refine, for example, that you can use for improving return bloom in Honeycrisp. You do have some time for improving return bloom in some other varieties like Fuji. I would still suggest about two sprays of NAA spaced about 2 weeks apart. Maybe the first spray this week, next week, and then the next spray sometime in mid-June. And similarly for other varieties where you're having return bloom issues, I would definitely suggest 2 to 3 sprays of NAA as between 2 to 3 ounces per acre. That is 5 to 7.5 ppm. And then at this stage, it will definitely not be thinning anything. And so it'll be safe to use. But even before, with the low rate, most varieties, they don't thin. And so it is still safe to use, especially for Honeycrisp. That is a proven recipe to use for improving return bloom. Now, for other parts of the state, northern Pennsylvania or Erie, for example, they are still have a lot of time to catch up. They're about a week and a half behind where we are in the central and southeast part of the state. So if you get past the cold weather and you get into more warmer temperatures, more suitable for thinning late next week, and you're still able to thin, then you still have these two options available, which is a seed, which can be used effectively between 15 to 20 millimeters fruit size. And then Ethafon is also available, which you can use right about 15 millimeters to about 25 millimeters in fruit size. And so usually if you have a very heavy crop load, a seed by itself might not be enough for thinning. You will have to tank mix it with Maxell, the regular rate of Maxell that you would use. And for greater efficacy, you can always add in a surfactant or oil as well to help improve. A pint or quart per acre should help. And you can also add carbaryl to that mix. Similarly, with Ethafon, you can use anywhere from 0.5 to 1.5, 2 pints per acre. This depends. I'm talking about Ethafon as a product, but there's also other products out there, Motivate, and I think there's one other product of Ethyl. And so depending on the product, you can check the label and see the rates. But for Ethafon, it's anywhere from 0.5 to 1.5 pints per acre. And so you can mix that with carbaryl again, a pint or a quart, depending on whether you want rewetting or not, no rewetting, thinning from carbaryl. So if you use a quart, usually you can get some rewetting thinning if you get rain within a few days after application. Or if you don't want that rewetting, you can just apply a pint of carbaryl per acre. But both seed and Ethafon can be mixed with carbaryl. And so you still have that option to thin if you're within that window moving towards the end of next week. So that's always an option. And then we talked about return bloom, and seems like we have set a good crop in a lot of varieties. And we are seeing a lot of rain, which is very different from how we were at this point of time last year, where we were pretty much in right in the middle of drought in many parts of Adams County. And so this year it seems like it's changed again. We have a lot of rainfall just in the past week. We got a couple of inches of rainfall here in my location in State College, and in Adams County as well. And so seems like we, at least until now, that we are good with water. We have a lot of water and so even if there's no irrigation, there's no worries, at least for this week until now, but also in the next few weeks, as well as there is some rainfall forecast for next week as well. That's pretty much it for me. Thanks.
Awesome, Sean. Thanks for the update. Yeah, I know yesterday when I left the house it was 45 degrees, so it's definitely been a cold, cold week, cold couple days. Kari.
Okay, so I've got pretty much a short update. So just to recap, last week we were still talking about the final push for scab, rust, and well, I guess mainly the big one was apple scab and rust, whether it was Crin's rust or cedar apple rust for basically the southern part of the state. We are out of that time period, so we're done with primary apple scab. So the remnants of overwintering spores in those leaves, the mature spores, we're done. The rust galls have dried up, so they aren't spewing anything. Marsanina is still a threat because that still will drag on a few more weeks. But right now, like today with the temperatures being in like the upper 50s and maybe low 60s, this is relatively cool. But last week was great conditions. And then moving into the weekend and early next week, it looks like we've got, again, good temperatures as far as that sweet spot of like mid to upper 60s to the mid 70s. That's what Marsanina or apple blotch really likes. So still be on alert for that. For the folks in the northern half of the state, we saw you last week during the spring meetings. You are currently in your last week because you were about a week behind us, a week, 10 days behind us. So you are in your last week for apple scab. And I don't think you guys have rust from the sounds of it, but apple scab is what you want to be worrying about. And again, Marsanina is still a problem. Apple blotch is still a problem for you. So as far as kind of moving on for other diseases that need to be on your radar for apples, sooty blotch and fly speck, thanks to all the rain we've had, we have met our threshold hours, wetness hours, to trigger management. So folks should be hopefully keeping their sprays on their trees, kind of amidst these really rainy conditions. Sooty blotch and fly speck is very easy to control. This is something you're going to be worrying about all season long, especially when you've got wet conditions. Captan is enough, Captan and Topsin. If you're still using Mancozeb right now, Mancozeb is okay. Anything you are using to control for bitter rot is going to be fine. This is a very straightforward disease to control. There should be no problems. When problems occur is when your fungicides aren't staying on the fruit. So if we have really frequent rain conditions and the fungicides are getting off, this is when sooty blotch fly speck is a problem, when there's no fungicides on the fruit. Otherwise, this is a very, very straightforward, easy disease to control. As far as organic options, sulfur is still your best bet with it. As far as other products for organic management, I have seen some control with the product Oso, that's a polyoxin D salt. When it's not under high pressure conditions, so frequent rainy conditions, the biologicals, your serenades, your double nickels, your stargus, they will give you a modicum of control as well. But again, if you've got very optimal conditions, very wet conditions, it might be a struggle. So consider the use of sulfur during those periods. As far as bitter rot, I want bitter rot to be on everyone's minds right now because we are nearing the end of May, beginning of June, and looking at the temperatures next week. Temperatures are creeping up into the upper 70s. So don't still consider keeping your foot on the gas with this. Bitter rot snuck up on us last year. The controls I would encourage you to use now for your really bitter rot prone fruit, like Honeycrisp. Think about Aprovia and Omega. These two products are excellent, especially when you're tank mixing them with 3 pounds to the acre of Captan. That gives you an extra boost. Captan by itself is great, but considering the rainy conditions we've had, I would add something else to that Captan to control for bitter rot. Aprovia and Omega, or fluazinam is the active ingredient of Omega. These have a 28-day to 30-day PHI. So that's why I want to see those products used now versus later in the season. So for Opervia and Omega, I should say Omega, there is a generic out there called Orbis. So you do have options for fluazinam. Fluazinam is the active ingredient you're aiming for. They've got identical labels as far as control goes, as far as rates go. As always, I always recommend tank mixing with Captan because Captan really is the best and product for controlling for bitter rot, but it can easily wash off. So you do need to tank mix something. For later in the season, as we go into late June and July and August, think about and also depending on where you are at with your pre-harvest, you can still use Aprovia and Omega. Just be mindful of that pre-harvest interval. Also be thinking about your Frac 11s, Flynn Extra, Luna Sensation, Maravon, those ones. And also the closer you get to harvest, I really encourage you to include Maravon as your last spray. So just for bitter rot, as a take-home message, really be vigilant monitoring the weather conditions. Get those fungicides on before the rain event. That fungicide packs a bigger punch when it's on the fruit first and then the spore lands on it. It works much better than after the fact. So please make sure your fruit are protected ahead of time, ahead of that rain event. And then finally for apples, I recommend folks, if they haven't already started, to scout for fire blight. We had a handful of fire blight infection conditions this year, and then some straggler blooms that had come in for various varieties. Just please monitor. I will probably get out an article next week going in a little more detail about scouting and monitoring for fire blight as far as we move in. That I'll probably be discussing more of that in the next podcast that we have, but just start scouting now. Moving into stone fruit, cherry leaf spot for your sour cherry trees. It's like scab. You still got to be controlling. The spores are still very active right now, so and they will be active. They're active all season, so the only way to manage it is through suppression of the disease by using fungicides. And you have lots of options. So whatever works for apple scab is going to work for cherry leaf spot. Brown rot right now, Captan sulfur is enough to keep the latent brown rot spores suppressed out there. Rusty spot, we are in the tail end of rusty spot as far as control, but considering how wet it's been, it's kind of the proverbial crapshoot as far as what's going to manifest on those fruit. I haven't had a chance to scout my own orchards for rusty spot. We did have some dry conditions up until May 1st, and then it's been wet all month. So we'll see what happens there. And I think that's it. I think that's it for the bacterial spot. That's the last thing I want to mention. We are in really good bacterial spot weather. The previous podcast, I went into much greater detail as far as your options and also being aware of using copper during slow drying conditions. These are slow drying conditions the last several weeks, so I wouldn't be using copper right now. Use it during dry conditions. So just be very mindful of the use of copper because copper is a general biocide. It's great for disease management, but it's a general biocide, so it's also going to kill plant cells and cause some holes in the leaves. So just be judicious with the amount that you use in your orchard on your peaches. So that's it. That's all I have.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary. Sounds pretty comprehensive, and boy, oh boy, if we could get some dry weather.
Yeah, I know. Who would have thought we would have said we would be saying that?
Yeah. So, and last but not least, Greg, take us away.
Yes, this weather is interesting. Uh, it's also because of the temperature, it's really affecting the development of insects and probably my influence the timing for our regular applications if we are looking what we did in the past and so on. One thing to remember is right now that when we are in the day temperature in the 60s, the accumulation of the gridace is much lower than it is, let's say, when we are in the 70s or 80s. Looking at newer, if you look at the gridae accumulation in the last few days for codling moth, we are accumulating single digits to the timing when the spray should be the most effective. The very moment we go into the 70s, those digits will change into those teens. And then when we are 80s or more, during a single day, we actually will be accumulating 20 plus degridae a day. And remember that insect development, the development of eggs, development of larvae, all of them really depends from the temperature. And it's not really the number of days between the sprays, but this is the number of the heat accumulations where those are those degridae that we're trying to follow up. So, on the average year, we can say that, okay, 250 degridae, which should be between the first application for codling moth and the second codling moth application, it's about plus minus 2 weeks. Well, when we accumulating only 8 degridae per day versus accumulating 20 something degridae per day, those 14 days might become 10 days or might become 21 days. So be careful about it when you think that, oh, I usually spray every 2 weeks and it works for me. This might not work. So be careful, look at the temperature. The rain is not really affecting how insect developing, unless they are washed out if there is a pour down. But generally, it is important to understand that temperature is influencing how fast insects develop, and this should have impact on when is the best timing to spray. Talking about sprays, Oriental fruit moth and plum curculio are basically done. Plum curculio is done for a season. Oriental fruit moth, we are done with the first generation. Saying this, and I keep saying this sentence again and again, I remember seeing plum curculio still feeding on apples in the beginning of June. So if you know you had the problems before, it still might be prudent that when you go after other pests, add something that might help you with plum curculio. With oriental fruit moth, there's nothing really can be done at this stage. The larvae are most of the time are in the shoots, either peaches or apples, and then they cannot be killed. Saying this, it is a perfect time to assess what kind of pressure of oriental fruit moth you are dealing with just by going to the orchard and spending some time looking for the flagging on the trees. Flagging on the trees is basically a wilted growing terminal with some sign of frost somewhere on the shoots, and we're talking top of the shoots, and the tunnel inside the shoots. That's where oriental fruit moth larvae are right now. We collected some oriental fruit moth adults when the flight started back in April. And in the lab, under constant temperature, under perfect conditions, we already have the flight of the second generation. We already have adults that emerge from the eggs laid by those individuals that were collected earlier on in April. Again, I think we are ahead of what is happening in the field. Again, we're talking about those degradase accumulation, but this is the time when you cannot control first generation because it's too late, and it is too early to decide what to do about the second generation, but it is the time that you can gather information to know if you need to control oriental fruit moth later through the season. One insect that is right now in the prime to control is codling moth. Most places should already have the first application done. The second application should be about those 250 degree days base 50. Again, it might be next week. I don't think anyone will need to spray the second application, before mid next week, looking at the forecast. But again, forecast can always change. Because like in Biglerville, we are right now at about 360, 350 degree days. So we are about 100 degree days after the first application. And with the accumulation for the next week at about 8, 9 degree days per day, the timing will be late next week or early in June. This will be the second application for codling moth. And this is something to remember. It's not about the calendar, guys. Again, it's about the temperature, because that temperature is the factor influencing the development of insect the most. One thing that already happened, and I got a picture from the grower who sent me a photo, the periodical cicada, brood 14, is out. Big announcement. I have not seen it in my eyes, but I got the photo taken this year with the periodical cicada. Again, with the wet ground, cicada will have easy time to get out. Saying this, when we are that cold, they will not be really too crazy to get out and be not able to do anything because, well, they are insects. However, right now, when we get to the point when we will be in those upper 60s, 70s, or 80s, and if your orchard is located in the counties that will be affected by the brood 14, look for it because they will be start coming out. Those first individuals that we already have seen, I'm on the picture, some of you might already see them on the trees, basically means that they are ready and they will be coming out. Another thing to mention right now is Persilla. Those of you that trying to protect your pear trees from Persilla, I know that some of you really like to use Surround. In my mind, this will be the last time to use Surround in this season. The reason I'm saying this is You can use surround to the day of harvest, but you really don't want to have the surround residue on the fruit when the fruit are harvested. So usually what I would recommend, and this is go past, but this would be like the last time that I still feel good enough about applying surround right now, and a pretty good chance that most of the residue will be washed out from the fruit before the harvest. One thing about applying surround is if you didn't do it earlier on, remember that surround is a kaolin clay. And if you go with the one application of surround at the full rate of 50 pounds in 100 gallons, and you do the spray, the chance of washing out or basically, not sticking to the foliage or fruit is very high. The way I would recommend using surround right now, if that's what you want to do, is do a partial spray 2 days apart or 1 day apart. Use the first 15 pounds as on 1 day, and then when it's dried out, use the remaining in as another spray. Think about it as the primer and the color of the paint that you're trying to use. This 15 pounds will not really change the color, but will leave enough residue. Then the remaining 35, if that's the way how you divide it, will stick much better to fruit. So I would think that it will be much more effective treatment spraying surround as 2 applications of total of cumulative 50 pounds per 100 than one application of 50, and then let's have so much things dropping to the ground and so on. Another thing to look at this moment are mites. With the weather we have, you should not have a problem with mites. If you did anything like oil or any acaricides, or you went with Agrimag at petal fall, mites should not be a problem yet at this time. But if you in any way see the mites right now, this is a perfect time to use Zeal to control mites. Zeal need to be used when the pressure is started to build. When you use Zeal later, it will not help you. So this is the time to use Zeal if needed. Not everyone will need it. And if you already did something for the mites earlier on, then probably you don't have to worry about it. And I just got a text message this morning asking if this is a good time to put the stinkbug traps and spotted wing Drosophila traps out. And the answer is yes and yes. Your stinkbug traps right now will work to help you monitor nymphs that might be showing up in the orchards. Brown marmorated overwinter as adults. They fly out from their overwintering shelters. They may go to your orchards, or they might go to any other plant, lay eggs, and those eggs will start hatching right now, and they will be keep hatching, and the adults will keep flying. If you had a problem in the past, you worry about it. If you put the trap out, it will detect presence of nymphs or adults in your orchard. Will you need to control them? It's difficult to say. The issue is you might not have high enough pressure and you can't control all of them. With the spotted wing Drosophila, the story is different. They also overwinter as adults, and depends from the weather, they are moving to any stone fruit crop or blueberries or raspberries or even strawberries at any point. If you know you had a problem in the past, then having traps out. And I would put those traps, on the edges. Don't put the traps in the middle of the block you're trying to control, because they are coming usually from the edges. They're coming from the outside. and then do what you need to do. Again, this is insect that is extremely difficult to control. It keep coming in waves, and it will affect any soft skin fruit. It's not problem on apples, pears. Most of the time, it's not a problem on peaches, but everything else, it can be affected. Sour cherries, sweet cherries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, anything like this will be a good host. And again, if the weather change and we get into those 80s, 90s, it's 12, 16 days, and we have another generation. So they will build extremely fast. And if we don't control them now coming, they might be in the huge numbers in your orchard when you will be ready to harvest. This also affects plants, but plants will be later on for the season. So that's really all the insect update I have. And again, right now, insects are not affected by the rain to the level as the disease or the tree growth are directed, but the warmer the temperature, the better conditions for the insects. And then we have to worry about them too. So that's all I have. Any questions that I might try to answer?
No, thanks, Greg. That was really great. I've been keeping an eye on the cicada flight just because I've gotten so many questions already this year about, hey, what about these? Not mostly from commercial growers, but just from folks with an interest in what's going on at in Berks County. One poor gentleman called and said, man, I just had these 2 years ago. I thought I was only going to get these every 13 years. And then we had to talk about broods, and he was very disappointed.
No, and again, it's, yeah. And there is really no straight explanation why different broods are present in the ground, even in the same area, and they coming at different time. I mean, we have the table in the production guide that basically tells when and where different broods are showing up, and that's how people can find out and know if their area will be affected. So that's really the only way you can do. One thing about cicada, I mentioned this I think last time, but I will say it again. When you start seeing them, don't panic. They don't do any damage to your trees or your fruit or anything that they are on. 10 days after you start hearing them making a lot of noise is the time, and those 10 days again is weather dependent. It's again weather dependent thing, but plus minus 10 days after hearing noise and so on, if you want to protect especially your young trees, that's the time to start controlling them. Any broad spectrum insecticides, most neonicotinoids will help you lower the population, lower the pressure. And again, the young trees are the one that needs to be taken care of.
Awesome. So we will do one last one. So from here on out, we're probably going to go to 2 weeks for the season. And we'll do a plug, not the last plug before field day. We'll have another episode before field day.
And
Two more episodes before
I
field day.
want to mention field day. So
But yes, I was
as a
gonna.
reminder, it's a good
Yeah.
segue. As a reminder, June 25th, 2025 at the Penn State Fruit Research and Extension Center. We've got a great field day plan. Don will put the link in the description of this podcast. But for folks who don't feel like going to the link, if you Google it or whatever search engine you put, please type in specifically Penn State Fruit Research and Extension Center Field Day. That is the title. There's been some conversations about the trickiness of finding this through a search. So you need to specifically write Penn State Fruit Research and Extension Field Day. You'll get it then. It is on the extension website, on the fruit team's website under workshops. It's also on the Penn State Fruit Research and Extension Center's website. It is like the first thing that you see on the homepage. So it's in multiple locations, but Don will put it in also a link in the description.
Yeah, using the link in the description will be your easiest way to do it. Um, it will not be abbreviated to FREC if you know FREC as FREC. But that'll be available for you and easy to use. Um, yeah, so our next episode should be right around the 5th. I will get this edited. We will keep this brief in our exit and say goodbye, everybody.
See you later. Good luck.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Let's hope it will get dry a little bit. Drier soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.